I don't see my video. My video is on, but I don't see it.
Do you have like a bar above your camera?
Huh? Yeah, I do, and it looks like the video is on. Like, as far as I'm concerned, the video is on, but I just don't see it. You don't see me, right?
No.
No,
Yeah,
we can't see you.
Minutes ago, when I first logged in, I could see it, but now I don't see it. I haven't done anything differently. So I'm restarting the video, but now I can't. Yeah. Yeah, I can't. I haven't covered the camera or done anything about it, but. So let's see if we have anybody else show up. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. Commissioners Owen and Cariello and Kiana and Christian and Kim, and now we have Commissioner Harding here, and Co-Chair Russell is here with us too. I can't see her either, but yeah, I can't see. I can't see. I don't know what I've done. So it's 7:03. Let's go ahead and get started.
Let me get y'all up on live.
What to do? I'm gonna try to rejoin and see if I can come in with the video. I'm gonna try and rejoin. Okay.
You're on mute. There you
I haven't done anything differently. But
there you go.
I haven't done anything different. Anyway, so good evening, everybody. As Kim reminded us a few minutes ago, this will be our last subcommittee meeting of the year. So welcome, and thank you so much for all the work you've done over the past year, because it's been a year in December. So this has been, a long journey. So I want to see, is everybody doing okay? Everybody excited about where we are now at this point? We're almost done. So anyway, so good evening, and I'm here kicking off the last meeting of the Mission and Vision Subcommittee for the Social Justice, Race, and Equity Commission for Brookhaven. Good evening. I'm Aixa Pascual. I'm the co-chair with co-chair Russell. She's going to be taking notes regarding the recommendations, so she's going to be off camera.
Good evening.
Good evening. Yes, there she is. So before we start, let's do a little icebreaker, and let's talk a little bit about each of you can share the biggest thing you've learned from the past 20 months, the biggest lesson or the biggest silver lining. If you want to share that, please go ahead. And I'll look at my screen and I'll go in that order. So I have Kiana. What do you want to share about your silver lining or biggest lesson from the last 20 months now?
In relation to the commission, or just
no, to your life, to everything. No, not to the commission.
Okay.
To as a human being, what have you learned to value, or what have you learned, or
yeah, I think the biggest thing that I've realized in the past 20 months is that life is very short and fragile, and so you should definitely make sure that you're, doing things you love, spending time with people you love, doing things that make you happy. That's something that I've been trying to focus on more. In the past 20 months, we've actually lost a few family members this year. So that's really been hard on our family, but we've learned a lot from it and we've grown a lot closer as a result. So that's what I've learned.
Okay, sorry to hear that, but I think a lot of people have gained that valuable lesson from the pandemic. So thank you for sharing that, Diana. So next I have Commissioner Carrello on my screen.
Good evening, and my lesson is kind of the same as Kiana's. In the middle of all this, I had this very significant health scare that took 6 months to diagnose, and so I've been diagnosed with a really rare disease, but it's treatable, and I completely echo that you can't take anything for granted. You just have to live every day to the fullest.
We're sorry to hear that, Commissioner Curl. I hope the prognosis looks good for you.
It does, but I mean, like everything else, there's new normal, right?
Yes. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. Next, I have Commissioner Hardy. We don't see you, but we can hear you.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear
you. Okay. Yeah, I hate to kind of copy the same thing, but yeah, it's the same. It's honestly the same thing. I had a friend pass away in July in a car accident, and then I've had some close friends who've lost some family members recently. So just kind of just appreciating life and just, realizing that tomorrow's not promised and that every day is a gift. So just to, not take things for granted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you again for sharing that, Commissioner Hardy. Now I have Co-Chair Russell.
I feel the same way, and I'm thankful for you all sharing what your lessons learned. And I would say, for me, it's been having dialogue and how much you learn from each other by really sharing stories. Learning, I think, how to apologize has been one for me, and how to ask for help is another one that I'm still working on. But it's been, and then of course, taking care of yourself. I have been needing a hip replacement for the last year. And with the most recent stress of looming deadlines and my son going into high school next year and needing all the it just was overwhelming, and it just took its toll on me over the last couple of weeks. But there is light at the end of the tunnel. I feel it happening. So thank you for that, asking us that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for sharing it, Commissioner.
Yeah.
And I hope next week is better for you than this week. So next I have Christian.
Well, I'll try and share my screen. I don't have very good light here. I'm in my car, but here, I'll turn this on and see what happens. Really twofold. I'll focus on the positive first. The depth of compassion and fortitude for so many leaders to power through the really difficult issues that everything's become an issue now. Everything's become partisan, and identity politics have torn so many institutions and relationships apart. So learning that there's so much depth and character of some really good people out there and are willing to use it and risk it. But on the flip side, learning that there can be such indifference and callousness and shallowness of people who call themselves leaders at every level. That to me has been really eye-opening.
Well, thank you, Christian, for sharing that. Yeah, I see that too. So yeah, you see a lot of people who've shown compassion that you didn't even know they had, and now, but you see the other side too. So thank you, Commissioner Owen.
I think just thinking about priorities and resetting priorities and being able to put family first more, and being able to look at, what is, what we previously thought was necessary or needed, and to really put into perspective what that actually means.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you for sharing that. And Kim?
if I should say ditto or amen to everything that was said, but I think the fragility of everyday life, and so the need to manage it and handle it with care and to be grateful for it. It's been my lesson over the last 20 months, everything from, similar to Karen, an unexpected diagnosis to seeing both the best parts of humanity and the most challenging parts, as Christian pointed out. Just says, we're going to take each day and hold it precious, and similar to what Kiana said. So thank you all for sharing.
And thank you, Kim, for sharing that. So, I would echo everything that you've said. I think that, the pandemic, for me personally, I think it shook me to the core. Like for a lot of us, it really made me see life in a whole new light, life as a finite thing. And, what do I want out of the life that I have remaining, whether it's, a year or 2, 10, 20 years. What do I want to do with that life, and who do I want to spend with the rest of my life? So it really shook me and made me ask a lot of really deep questions. It made me appreciate more the present. I tended to live more in the past or the future, but I learned to appreciate so much more the gift of the present and being in the moment. So those were just a few of the lessons. It taught me about the fragility of life, and you have it today, you don't know if you're going to have it tomorrow. So it's just taught me many, many lessons, like it has to all of us. So thank you for sharing these personal thoughts with us. So next, so last month we were supposed to meet on October 14th, and we didn't really have a quorum. So Co-Chair Russell and I decided to cancel the meeting, but we were able to still meet in person. We met with Co-Chair Russell and Commissioner Vera Kane, who's not here this evening, but she came to meet with us. We met in person at St. Martin's School with Tiffany, and the three of us, we read through all the city reports that you submitted, the GARE report that Jose submitted. We look at everything that you submitted from your city. So thank you so much. And we sat down, and based on everything that we learned, we crafted some recommendations, and we shared those recommendations with you at the general commission meeting a couple of weeks ago. So today we want to devote most of the time to, finalizing the recommendations. Before we do that, if anybody, I think, Jose, we didn't get a chance. I know Tiffany incorporated your thought, your lessons from GARE into the final document, but into the chart that we were doing for each of the cities. But I didn't get a chance to read it because at the time of the meeting, the file I was not able to read. So do you want to share, some of the highlights, for people who are not here? If you and Melissa and Commissioner O and Commissioner Carla can share some of the highlights, and Co-Chair Russell briefly of the city reports. And but before that, let's approve the minutes from the last meeting that we had at the beginning of September. From September 2nd, did you get a chance to look at the meetings? We had Stephen Chapman, the assistant city manager, talk to us. We talked about the cities and assign the cities. So does anybody want to introduce a motion to approve those minutes from September? They were included in.
I'll submit a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you. Do we have anybody to second that motion?
I'll second. This is Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner. So yeah, so the minutes from the September 2nd meeting are approved. So that was the last meeting that we had. So before we delve into the recommendations, let's go briefly, because I know Co-Chair Russell had a meeting with the people in Asheville after we met last time. So she can share some of that. And I'd like for Commissioner Hardy to share some of his findings from GARE. And if we can get Commissioners Carrillo and Owen to share a little bit about their cities briefly, so we can focus mostly on the recommendations this evening. So let's start with, Commissioner Hardy, what were some of the findings from talking to Gare?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I wasn't able to actually speak with Gare. There was no number to contact, and I emailed them 3 separate times within that a month time period, and didn't get any correspondence back, unfortunately. But luckily, their website is pretty thorough as far as information and kind of giving a good idea of what they stand for and kind of what they do. So the GARE is the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, and it's actually a national organization. And that through kind of going through their site, I was able to find out that the city of Decatur actually used GARE within their government organization. But some of the things that they do is just some strategies is just kind of use a racial equity framework. They build organizational capacity. They implement racial equity tools. They're pretty data driven as far as what they're trying to accomplish and how they get results. And then they partner with other institutions and communities. And then they kind of operate under the guidance of urgency and accountability. And they've been around since 81. So they've been around for 40 years now. So they're pretty well known. But it seems like I guess it's a profit for organization just based on what I read, but I'm not 100% sure, just again, because I wasn't able to speak to anybody. But they seem like they do a lot of good work, and they have done a lot of things in a lot of major cities.
Thank you for sharing that, Commissioner Hardy. And Co-Chair Russell, I know you had a fantastic conversation with the folks in Asheville. They even invited us to visit, and they wanted to come, here. Can you share a little bit of what's going on in Asheville?
Yeah, and so I'm glad that I'm following Commissioner Hardy, because the city of Asheville uses the 6 strategies that the GARE model has put out. So that could be one of the recommendations. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but that, being able to consult with this organization and utilize their strategies can be something that the city of Brookhaven considers. But when I spoke with Brenda Mills, we spent about an hour and a half together. It was, she kind of broke down just what the city of Asheville looks like regionally, the western end, and she said that they only seem to be progressive around LGBTQIA issues because the Black population is dwindling from about 20% now to about 10%. The housing costs are increasing, and there's an influx of people who are coming there for the trails and the rafting and good transportation. But she says that the Black neighborhoods have not gotten any of the money or seen the results of this influx of people and businesses. And so her office is actually the Office of Equity and Inclusion. She does have a small staff. I think she has a staff of 2, but they have a very robust website where they define equity, racial equity, inclusion, and inclusive engagement. And they on the outset, they say that they are utilizing the racial equity framework that is utilized by GARE in order to right size some of the inequities that they've identified in Asheville. She has been with the city for most of her life, she said, and she more than likely would be tapped as being the director. Right now, I think she's the interim director. There's a human, I'm looking at my notes, a human relations committee, an African American heritage committee. They have money to do a disparity study for minority businesses. So she's really excited about that. And they're right in the middle of a reparations plan. They have racial healing mini grants that have been utilized by different businesses in order to ameliorate the the racial injustice that people are experiencing in the city of Asheville. And they provide a timeline, and it's really, really for the grant making process. But she was very excited about the work that we were doing in Brookhaven. She did say that we can come and visit. And we, of course, invited her to come and see us, and particularly after we have, shared our findings and our recommendations with the city.
Thank you for sharing that, Commissioner and Co-Chair Russell. Commissioner Carrillo, I know you had City of Griffin, correct, in Georgia? And I know you shared those comments with us, and we looked over them. Is there anything that stood out in those comments from talking to Griffin?
Well, they were in a different situation than we are. Brookhaven has been proactive in trying to take action before any serious incident that has inflicted so many cities occurred. In Griffin, they had a couple things happen that forced them to take action. One was just dissatisfaction, I think, among city employees that led them to chair an employee commission that has led to some exciting stuff. For example, at the recommendation of the steering committee of the employee group, they now have a diversity statement posted in every city facility. So every rec center, every park, they've got a statement supporting diversity, which, to me, I think that's important. And then they had a dust up with the mayor. They changed the structure of the city government and created, whereas in the past, the mayor was appointed among one of the city council members, they created kind of an at-large position that became a mayor. And it led to some conflict with the council, and which led to I think because of the polarization that Christian mentioned that we're living in, they realized that they could benefit from some diversity training. And so they brought in a group from UGA that did some training. But, that was very different. I just lost all my windows. Oh, there we go. Okay. Maybe, Exa, maybe it's like weird computer problem night tonight. But the thing that really stood out to me in talking to Griffin was the close partnership that they have formed between the county, Spalding County, and the school board. And they are doing it to tackle these systemic issues that have been on our radar, like inequality, inequity. How do we help the schools that are in disadvantaged areas? How do we attract more high-paying jobs across the city? How do we create more affordable housing? This is something that they all agreed was that they wanted to work together. And so in addition to the city, the county, and the school board creating their own strategic plans, the three of them have come together and are working closely, especially trying to tackle things like housing and jobs, equity, and then improving schools. They're trying to tackle that all together. And so they've created a strategic planning document, I think 3, 5, 10 years down the road. And I was really impressed with that. I think that would be something that would be really beneficial for us, especially as we watch what's playing out with the proposed city of Buckhead, and the negative impact that would have on those disadvantaged areas, those that are not up to equity in Fulton County. And we have kind of the same dynamic with us here in Brookhaven. We're the affluent part. We have great resources in a lot of areas, and yet there are parts of DeKalb County that are not, that don't share the same level of prosperity that we have. And so I found that really, I've welcomed their leadership on that front.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Carrillo. And Commissioner Owen, you had Minneapolis, correct? Or?
Yes, I had Minneapolis, and I'm sorry, I don't have my notes in front of me.
Yeah.
I think I had sent some pretty detailed notes for the commission, but I think what struck me is that they have several different either commissions or departments that center on race equity and inclusion and protecting civil rights. And they, in their charter or in their mission, vision, and values, they rewrite it. It's every like 3 to 4 years. And so they did it just maybe 2019, and they had included racial equity as one of their priorities and part of their mission and vision, which I found very interesting because it was before the events of last year that it had been put into their mission and vision. So I just found that interesting that they had that direction, and they still had the events that occurred with George Floyd and things. But they actually had some departments. I was not able to speak to anybody. I sent some emails, but never got a response. But they have a pretty detailed website and things. So, but they actually have it as part of their city structure. And so that was something I had suggested, was whether, Brookhaven could do something where they actually incorporated into part of the a city department and that sort of thing. But yeah, so it's kind of in a nutshell about Minneapolis.
Thank you for sharing that, Commissioner. Oh, and I reached out to the city of San Antonio in Texas, and I think it's a pretty long-running program. They had a non-discrimination ordinance that was passed in 2014, and in 2016, the city created a diversity office, and a few years later, it became the equity office. So now it's the Office of Equity, and it's fully staffed. It has a budget, a director, and several officers there. Some of the things that they mentioned was that they created a Equity 101 curriculum. They do a lot of training within the city, which is, I think, about 13,000 employees. And they do have they mentioned they have an equity tool or equity scorecard for bond issues. So I thought that was pretty interesting. I don't know the details about it, but they, when they issue bonds, they take that into account. So it sounds like it really permeates everything they do. They have a pretty unique demographic. It's like over 60% of the population in San Antonio is of Hispanic, is Hispanic. So it's a pretty big, it's pretty different from other cities. But one of the highlights that he said is that usually in terms of engaging the community in surveys, they had seen an increase of 60% in the percentage of African Americans who have participated to a community survey, which he thought that was really, really big. But anyway, they helped a lot. This office did a lot of outreach during the pandemic to tell people about all the technical assistance there was in terms of rental assistance to the office. They translated a lot of materials to Spanish and other languages to make sure that people understood. And I also reached out to Athens, Clark County, and one thing that stood out from that, it's a relatively new initiative. It's now 2 people. It was 18 months ago, less than 2 years ago. But what the catalyst for their initiative was the dress code for the downtown bars, and apparently the way that this dress code was being implemented, some people I think felt that they were being discriminated against. So it was apparently students and like more of a grassroots movement that led to this. People were just not happy that this dress code was being, applied to some and not to others. So that's what led to it. But anyway, I think in all these cities that we've talked about, this is a work that takes years. It takes resources. San Antonio has been at this for at least, 7 years. Other cities, may have been at this longer, but it takes time, it takes resources, and it takes, intentional leadership on the part of the city to establish an office and to fund that office and give it some clout. So anyway, on that note, let's go on to the recommendations because we have like only 30 more minutes for our meeting. Commissioner Russell, do you want to go ahead and list the recommendations that we agreed to at the meeting 2 weeks ago?
Yes. So the 2 recommendations that came to the fore, and so you'll have to, fellow commissioners, confirm that what my data says is correct. And then also, if we have a template that each recommendation will live on a template that was provided by Chrysalis Labs. And so the first is that That's the wrong one open, sorry. That we will make a recommendation that the city of Brookhaven review the city's charter. And then the second recommendation that we noted was that we would recommend that they would review the city's mission and vision statement. In fact, the charter recommendation was that there was because the charter is so large that we recommend that they would hire an outside firm to conduct an equity audit of the city's charter. And so I think it was recommended at one of our other meetings that we could provide 3 total recommendations with the rationale. And so is there an idea on what the other, given all the research that we've done and speaking with different cities, is there a thought on what that 3rd recommendation should be?
So Tiffany, this is Kim. I'm just going to play lawyer and maybe ask some probative questions to the group, if that's okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I would say a couple things. One, I would tell you to think about, when I was listening to everyone report out, I think a couple things stood out. One was some guiding principles that need to be thought through. May they be, to use the national guidelines set out by SJREC or others. The other would be to think about where this work could possibly live within the organization, within the city, because if no one's responsible, everyone's responsible and nothing gets done. So like who you spoke to and how they structured and how they move things forward, how could we ensure that this work goes forward? And then lastly, I would ask us to consider as we talk about the rationale for each recommendation, to think about processes that you heard and learned. Particularly, one of the things a theme that I heard through the discussions of this subcommittee was ensuring equity in terms of engagement, particularly across both all types of communities in Brookhaven, as well as staff and how we ensure staff, business, and everyone is equitably heard. And so anything that you learned about the process that would inform the mission vision review, the charter review, and where this lives might be valuable.
Mm-hmm.
This is Christian. If I could add, I believe there'll be some overarching recommendations that cross all 4 subcommittees. And one of those will be enterprise level community engagement processes. Because right now we don't have uniform processes. Police might use one way of doing it, and planning another, and public works a third, and the communications department a 4. So that's something we're going to be working on anyway next year, is an enterprise approach to community engagement, but that might be a recommendation. As it relates to finding a home for it or making sure there's follow through, a potential recommendation might be a report back to the city council from the city administration, or a report back to have the commission get back together sometime next year and have the city report back on progress of recommendations.
And I know, as you mentioned, Christian, that the city does a charter review every 5 years, and the next time it's next year. So if there's a way to, you already, budget for this. So if there's a way to incorporate a process or a person or something that may be able to look at it through the lens of equity, so that we don't overlap or try and do.
I think that's a good recommendation, and it'll be relatively easy to incorporate. And as you're filling out the form, the template, not only would you recommend, this is kind of where I see that kind of recommendation being fully fleshed out, not only having an independent equity review of the charter, but making sure that there's representation from everybody in the community on the charter committee. Because the charter review committee is prescribed by the charter and state law, but it's not limited to those number of people. And you would want to make sure that the charter has representation from lots of different stakeholder groups, and maybe even including somebody from the Social Justice, Race, and Equity Commission. So I think there are multiple sub-recommendations within the general recommendation of the city charter getting a good review.
Yeah, Christian, I like that. And one thing I remind, again, just trying to remember things that I noted were tapped into the pulse of this committee is, you were looking at the data of the changing demographics of the city and where power was and is, and suggesting a process that would ensure equity among that in terms of table, shared power at the table, not overemphasizing any particular structure, I think would be really good. And I think, there are some, in some of your conversations, obviously, there were some recommendations that you just at least might want to note, so that as Christian and others are putting this together, they have the resources based on what you heard from other cities that we can tap into in terms of how they did it.
Yeah.
Any other feedback on the recommendations we have, or any other that we want to make? What is the?
Like you said, I think each recommendation could have little sub-recommendations in it. So the one that relates to the charter, and then a secondary one that relates to vision and mission, is that sub-recommendations under each one of those would be ensuring that the administration of the government and the policy making process of the government adheres to the spirit and intent of the charter and the spirit and the intent of the vision and mission. Because many organizations, public and private, have flowery vision and mission statements, but they don't live to them. They don't manage to them. They don't hold themselves accountable to them. So a sub-recommendation would be not only have this independent review and have lots of engagement in developing and reviewing the charter, the vision and mission, but making sure that those seminal documents to the city are managed to all the way down to the entry-level employees.
Yeah. Okay, Kim, what is the deadline for submitting the recommendations? November?
Next week, I'll have to check. I think it's next.
So it's before the next meeting, and the next meeting
definitely,
is
definitely.
We have to.
Monday or Tuesday. I need to check, but I can confirm that.
Are we able, Tiffany, Commissioner Russell, to create a shareable document, or a document that, even if it's not shareable, we can all make comments to and pass it to the next person so that we can all get a chance to?
Absolutely. We can do that in Google Docs. I'll create a folder, which is what I was planning to do and didn't do. So I will create a folder with these three templates, and then and everyone can go in and just add and ask questions and flesh out sentences wherever they see, so so it'll be editable.
Okay, that's great. And can we give a deadline? So Kim, do you know what the deadline is?
I'll confirm, but I would, yeah. So when we send it out, Tiffany, I'll check and confirm the deadline, and maybe you can share that and maybe ask people to give it, so you'll have a couple of days to do your final edits.
So what I'll do is we'll send out an email between Commissioner Russell and I will send out an email in the next couple of days with that link, whether it's on Basecamp or Google Docs or wherever, so that you can access the link and make sure that, at the bottom or something, you put your initials so that we know who's made comments on it or who's reviewed it, because we want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to review it and put their feedback. And I also wanted to comment that, in the last week or so, we had to prepare an overview of our subcommittee for, part of the final report that we're doing. We have to prepare an overview of what we've done, and it was a good chance for me to take a toll on everything that we've done. We have done an amazing amount of work since the committee was created in April, because we've just been meeting with subcommittees in April, and we just done so much work, and it just gave me a better appreciation for all that we've done, how deeply we've looked into this issue, how I focus on this overview saying that we asked a lot of questions from the very beginning. We were asking a lot of questions about, where did the mission and vision come from? How did it happen? Who was a part of it? How was the city created? Who founded the city? What was the catalyst for the city's founding? What is the history of the area now known as the city of Brookhaven, the city of North Atlanta, or, whatever there was before? It just, we looked at Beaufort Highway. We looked at just different parts of the city, and we just asked a lot of questions. And in that sense, I feel pretty satisfied that we got a lot of work done over the past, 6-7 months. So I think that all that, will be reflected in our recommendations and in the work that we did, because it was a pretty extensive amount of work that we did in terms of the documents that we looked and the people that we reached out to and the speakers we had. So it was a pretty comprehensive, work that I think that we got done. So I hope that the recommendations, shine and show all the work and the hours that we put into this subcommittee. So we'll make sure that we'll let you know what the deadline is, so that we make sure that everybody gets a chance to review and contribute to the final document, so it reflects our collective will or our collective impressions.
That sounds
Any
great.
other comments, suggestions on the recommendations? What's next? Anything else that we need to do before we meet again as a big group in 2 weeks from tonight, our last meeting of the SJREC? Anything else that we need to do? But I think focusing on just crafting the recommendations with a good reason explaining why we're making each recommendation, and as Christian suggested, divide them into several sub recommendations, so we can do that. But I think there's plenty of things that we can recommend this to the city council.
Yes. And so I do want to just clarify one thing, Commissioner. And maybe this is a Christian and Kim question. So every subcommittee will be using the same template, which is titled the recommendation template, right? And is there a length kind of that we should be staying in? I know that we can add footnotes and appendices, but in terms of the actual recommendation document, what are other, if you know, what are other groups looking like?
I think the length is going to vary, and I think, one of the things we've talked about is uniqueness of this committee. I would rather you include everything, because one of the things we've talked to Christian about, or Christian has even raised, is that we'll have the official report, but we'll also maintain the background documents and information as quote appendices and the like.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important because, again, it's going to make life easier for those who get to carry on, and for you all as you come back and revisit this. So let's put all our thoughts out there, because I think it'll be valuable. If not immediately, it will definitely be valuable on implementation. The last thing I'll say is keeping in mind that we are so much about, this committee is so much about also focusing on the process.
Yes.
We're really clear on and we've been clear for several weeks or months about the mission, vision being rewritten, charter and alike, and Christian's been very supportive of that. I think where you're going to add value you'll add value there, but add additional value is talking about what you learned about the best way to achieve that, employing an equity lens from all that you learned from the hours you've spent with these other cities. It's that's the best part of this, is that the city of Brookhaven, whoever carries this forth, will not be starting from scratch. They will have the benefit of hundreds of hours of time that you've put in talking to people across the country to get the best of the best. And so you want to share the best of the best in your recommendations and sub-recommendations.
So Commissioner Russell, were we able to create that document that you wanted to create with for all the cities answering certain questions? Were we able to put that together?
Yeah, and it's incomplete because there were some fields that didn't apply to some cities.
So maybe we can share that when we
Yeah.
share the other document, we can share that so people can, if they know the information, they can fill it out or no, because just seeing what some of these other processes were will help us, because again, I think we cannot tell the city council, what to do. We could just make recommendations, and, we cannot tell them how to go about, doing the, rewriting or redoing the mission and vision, but we can share with them how, what other cities have done. So what our recommendations are, but so I think that will be very valuable, including that chart in the as a appendix. Okay, so can everybody make sure they're on mute? Because
Oh yes, I'm sorry.
I don't know if everybody's on mute. I'm sorry. Thank you. But anyway, so just to make sure that we have that as an appendix to the recommendations, that chart with all the other cities, to see. So that can inform the decision of the city council going forward. And we have a hand up. Is that Kim?
Yeah, just real quick, and I have to step off for supposed to be on another call as well, but I would just ask that you all may choose to, as co-chairs, just ask if every single one of the subcommittee members could maybe spend 15 or 20 minutes on their part of the chart and just, look at it, fill it in, because sometimes the questions might, again, help them think and remember something from the call that will help you all a lot. And then if they would everybody would give 30 minutes or 15 minutes on whatever the final document Tiffany shares out, I think it will make your lives a little bit easier if we all just sort of.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you for that. That's I think a good request, and I think that will help us tremendously. And Kim, before you leave, I'm still hearing not just because they're big recommendations, but 2 recommendations. Is there a third? So again, the first was around the city charter. The second was about the mission and vision statement. Is there a third separate document, a separate recommendation that I'm hearing, or is it 2 with sub recommendations?
I thought Christian raised a third in terms of where this could live, but maybe I missed.
Oh, yes. Oh, so that would be a third recommendation.
Or revisit in 1 year to make sure that the city goes through the recommendations to see if they've been implemented. So I don't know if it will be like.
Yeah, so we also talk about engagement process, and and that's one. So I guess the question is that one that we should create? Because then that sounds like a few other ones. And I just wanted to be clear.
Yeah.
I think the engagement for Christian Church is going to be like an overarching commission recommendation. That's what I understood from Christian, but we can include it as a sub recommendation in like the, when they redo the mission and vision, that community engagement be an integral part.
Yes, well, we would include that. Yeah, for sure.
But I think the commission as a whole should include it, because we found that, I think especially after reading the comments from the last meeting of the policing subcommittee that were reported in the newspaper, in the Reporter newspaper, I think, of the Chavo, one of the local newspapers, that I think that, they mentioned that they had a hard time connecting to the Latino community. And I think, we also saw that in our pop-ups, that we saw that when we went to the LAA, we saw that it was very hard to engage with this community. So maybe, we have to be more intentional and find ways that we meet them where they are, and we make more of an effort to engage this population in particular.
Well, Axel, does that raise the possibility of looking at a recommendation, again, beyond just the quote, community engagement, but particularly as you talk to cities that had diverse populations like San Antonio or Minneapolis, were there any lessons learned that we should put as a very specific recommendation beyond just quote, in community engagement? Was there anything that we think would really drive this process?
Yes, I think it's connected.
Systemic way.
That's a good question. I think it's connected to reconvening the commission. And so maybe, because I've heard something, maybe not the word affinity groups, but offices, with Asheville, it was African American Heritage Committee, Human Relations Committee, excuse me. Then there's reparations. So they have several committees or groups that are consistent, that are looking at a thing, or several issues across the cities.
So Tiffany, I think you're hitting on something, which is the overall, and I'm sorry, my husband and I are both on a conference call. He's a
That's
family.
okay.
Accountability, right? So the issue
Yes.
is ultimately the council and Christian post some of this work will decide the permanent structure, but maybe the third recommendation is about accountability over the next 24 months up until the final structure is determined, and that accountability could be both incorporate this existing commission or some reformatted way of that, and somewhat accountability to the community at large. I'll leave it up to you all, maybe based on your conversations, on ways that you might even make that a little bit more specific. But it does say, every 6 months or every year, and then there'll be an annual meeting. And, I think there's some ideas that came out of the Decatur discussion that really will hold us, this hard work, and those who we pass the baton to accountable to make sure the baton keeps moving down the road.
Yeah, I think that's it, Kim. That makes me feel really excited, because we want to continue to be servants, to see this, to be of service in a way that's helpful for the city to actualize these recommendations. The other thing that you just made me think about was, when I had to write my dissertation, you can never research everything fully, right? So at the end of it, you had to write limitations for future research or implications for future research. And one of the things that we deliberately decided that we were going to focus on process, because we knew that we couldn't rewrite the city's mission statement. But one of the things that we wanted to do as a commission, or as a subcommittee, was really engage with the community around the mission statement itself. Like, when you read this mission statement, what comes to mind? And I think can fall under this accountability, right? It is the community engagement strategy, but it's also highlighting that while we did do this work, there were some limitations on what we did and what we were able to do. And there's the beauty in those limitations is that's going to inform your process, or should inform the city's process later, right? And so the limitation that we had is also the limitation of the way that the mission and vision statement was created. And so now that we're both seeing this, we triangulated some data, we're both seeing that we've got to hear from the most affected, because other cities are listening to those voices. And we want to make sure that this commission in some form can be supportive of the city of Brookhaven going forward, and also ensure that those stakeholder voices are included in the process.
Yeah, so maybe, and again, I better run, but the third one is the process of accountability, but I'm enjoying the discussion too, as I'm saying. It is an accountability process. And then maybe, as you say, the notes and the sub recommendations would list, some ideas that you have all come up with in your research of how that can happen. And also, of course, engaging this commission and some of the ideas that Christian raised as well.
Okay, great.
Thank
So we
you
have 4
very
minutes
much.
left. Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Russell, go ahead.
No, I just want to say thank you to Kim before she jumped off.
Thank you, Kim. So we have 4 more minutes to summarize. We're gonna be, Commissioner Russell and I are gonna put together that document with the recommendations the next day or so, correct? And we're gonna send a link to all of you, and I'll send an email with a link with a deadline, and make sure that everybody can sign at the bottom or what, or, you know, make a note that they have reviewed it. So we will make sure that, ensure that everybody in our subcommittee has taken a look at it and may had a chance to make their comments. So we'll be doing that in the next couple of days. So be waiting, expecting for an email that we can send you that link so you can do that. And we'll have to wind this up by next week, because our next meeting with the group is in 2 weeks and the recommendations are due then. So in the next 10 days, we need to finalize everything and agree on the final version. So we'll be sending you by email on, you know, how we're going to go about this, but be on the lookout, because you're going to please review, get a chance to review the recommendations and give your comments and edits. Okay. So I hope everybody has a good evening, and I hope to see all of you at the commission meeting 2 weeks from today. Okay. Thank you so much for all your work. Good night.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye. Thank you.
Good night.
Bye-bye.